Elena Ward's fingers trembled as she hit send on a desperate text. She hadn't even thought it through, just typed in a rush of panic and hope. "Clara, please. The girls are sick again. I can't miss another shift. Can you cover for me?" The message went off into the void and silence answered back. No blinking dots, no quick reply, just the dull glow of her phone screen staring at her. Elena pressed her lips together, willing herself not to cry. She set the phone down on the counter and turned her attention back to the living room. On the worn sofa, Mira whined softly, curled beneath a faded fleece blanket. Beside her, Sophie lay quiet, cheeks flushed, gripping the threadbare stuffed bunny she never let go of. Their little faces told the story. Two young children fighting off yet another illness, and their mother holding everything together with little more than stubbornness and love. Elena dipped a cloth into cool water and pressed it against Mira's warm forehead. "It's all right, baby," she whispered. "Mommy's here." Her phone buzzed suddenly, and Elena snatched it up with relief, expecting her friend Clara's answer. But instead, the message that appeared made her blood run cold. "This isn't Clara, but I think we need to talk about the children." The number was unfamiliar. Portland area code. Elena's breath caught. She typed quickly, "Sorry, wrong number." But no response came. She locked her phone, trying to dismiss the unease twisting in her stomach. Maybe just some stranger being odd. She told herself to let it go, but her thoughts kept circling back to that message. 12 miles away, Marcus Hale stood by his window, staring at his phone. The words echoed in his mind. "The girls are sick again." Mira and Sophie. He knew those names. He shouldn't have, but he did. 2 years ago, curiosity had pushed him to follow up on something he was supposed to leave in the past. An anonymous sperm donation. There had been one confirmed success. A single mother named Elena Ward. Twins, 2 little girls. He had respected the legal distance, convincing himself he'd never interfere. Until now, the message clearly wasn't meant for him. But somehow it had landed in his private number, the one known by only a handful of people. Coincidence? It didn't feel like one. Something about it gnawed at him, as though fate itself had dropped an invitation into his hands. He hadn't planned on stepping forward. He hadn't planned on any of this. But now, he couldn't ignore the pull inside his chest. With a steadying breath, he picked up the phone and made a call that would change everything. The next day, Elena was rinsing out a baby bottle in the sink when she heard a knock at the door. Unexpected, sharp, too early for anyone she knew to be stopping by. Her heart leapt. She glanced toward the couch where Sophie stirred and Mira coughed weakly. Wiping her hands on a towel, Elena moved to the door and peeked through the peephole. A tall man stood outside. Dark wool coat, still patient posture. In one hand a phone, in the other a folded slip of paper. Elena cracked the door, cautious. "Yes," the stranger looked up, his expression calm but serious. "I'm sorry to show up unannounced," he said gently, "but we need to talk about the girls." Her chest tightened, panic surged. She started to push the door shut, but his hand steadied it. Not forceful, but firm enough to stop her. "My name is Marcus Hale," he continued. "I believe I received your message yesterday by mistake." Elena froze. Her throat felt dry. "You're that number." He nodded. "I am. And I believe Mira and Sophie might be my biological daughter." Silence filled the space between them, heavy and unyielding. Elena's hand gripped the doorframe, her pulse racing. "What did you just say?" she whispered. Marcus's voice was steady. "A few years ago, I made a donation through a fertility clinic. I never intended to pursue the outcome. But when your message came to me, I couldn't ignore it. I've known about you and the twins for some time. I've kept my distance. Until now." Her eyes narrowed. "How do you know their names?" "I hired someone. Legally," Marcus explained quickly. "Only to confirm whether my donation had resulted in children. Nothing invasive. Just records. I never intended to interfere in your life." Before Elena could speak again, a cough echoed from inside the apartment. Mira's small, raspy sound carried through the hall. Marcus flinched, not in surprise but with genuine concern. Elena turned her head toward the sound, then back to him. "You need to leave." "I will," he promised, reaching into his coat pocket. He pulled out a sealed envelope and held it out carefully. "But please, take this. I wrote it last night. Everything I need to say is in there. If, after reading it, you never want to see me again, I'll vanish. No questions, no interference. Just please read it." Her hands trembled as she took the envelope. Without another word, she closed the door. Marcus stood motionless outside, staring at the wood grain as though listening for some unspoken answer. Inside, Elena leaned against the door, clutching the envelope as if it burned. The girls shifted softly in the living room, their fragile breaths reminding her what was at stake. Hours later, she couldn't resist anymore. She sat by the kitchen counter, tore open the envelope, and unfolded a handwritten letter. The words struck her like a wave. If I'm wrong, I'll walk away. But if I'm right, if Mira and Sophie are the children born from my donation 3 years ago, then I can't pretend this doesn't matter. I never expected this. I never thought I'd be involved. But now, knowing they exist, I can't ignore it. I'm not here to claim anything, Elena. I only want to understand, to know them, even from a distance if that's what you choose. What's best for them, and for you, comes first. Always, Marcus. Elena's eyes blurred with tears. She dropped the letter and rushed to check on the twins. Sophie was asleep, Bunny tucked under her chin. Mira hummed faintly, cheeks still flushed but her breathing easier. Elena kissed both of their foreheads, her heart pounding with the impossible truth sitting on her kitchen counter. Later, curiosity, and something else she refused to name, drew her outside. Marcus's car was still parked on the curb. He sat inside, upright, watching the streetlights rather than her window. Gathering courage, Elena stepped out. "You know their names," she said, her voice tight. "You know, too much." Marcus climbed out of the car, his tone careful. "May I come in?" Every instinct screamed to say no. Yet something about his calm steadiness kept her from slamming the door on him. She hesitated, then finally nodded. Inside, she poured 2 glasses of water, though her hands shook the entire time. She slid 1 glass across the table toward him. "I thought you were a scammer," she admitted. "Someone who found out I used a donor and thought I'd be an easy target." "I would have thought the same," Marcus said honestly. "But when I heard their names that matched what I'd seen in the records, I knew it wasn't a coincidence." Elena's eyes narrowed again. "What records?" "I legally requested updates from the clinic," he explained. "Only the basics, no names or contacts. But I did learn there had been a birth. Twins, no father listed. When your message came, it fit the timeline perfectly. I couldn't ignore it." He pulled out a folder and set it on the table. Inside were dates, official stamps, clinic signatures, and his donor identification, 1175B. Everything lined up. Elena's throat tightened. She whispered, "I picked that profile because it said the donor liked classical music and that he volunteered with children. I thought I wanted kindness in their blood." Marcus didn't interrupt. He only listened, his gaze unwavering. Elena's shoulders slumped. "I didn't plan to be alone. I was with someone for 6 years we were going to marry. Then he walked out, said he didn't want children. A month later, I was told I had low ovarian reserve. 1 year, maybe less, to even try. I thought I'd meet someone else, but time ran out. I wanted to be a mother." Her voice cracked. "And then everything collapsed. My father's company imploded in a fraud scandal. Money, reputation, gone overnight. Headlines splashed everywhere. No one would hire me, pregnant, alone, disgraced. So I left the city and started over, piece by piece." Marcus tightened his grip on the glass in his hand, his jaw flexing. "I didn't know any of that," he said quietly. "Why would you?" Elena replied bitterly. "You were just the DNA." But when their eyes met, Marcus's voice was firm. "No, it's more than that now." Elena's breath caught. She hated that part of her, wanted to believe him. "I didn't bring you into this," she whispered. "No," Marcus said, his gaze flicking toward the sound of faint giggles drifting from the living room. "They did." The following morning, Elena opened her front door to find Marcus already waiting. His car was parked neatly at the curb, not blocking, not imposing. He stepped out when he saw her, his movements steady and deliberate, not like a man barging into someone's life, but like someone walking a tightrope, careful with every step. "I found a pediatric clinic," he said without preamble. "Private, discreet, no paperwork trail, no press, just a simple checkup. No cost." Elena folded her arms tightly across her chest. I told you I don't need help. I know, Marcus replied, his voice calm. This isn't help. It's information. Something in the way he phrased it caught her off guard. Not let me help you, but don't you want to know? The difference was subtle but important. She looked down at the twins. Mira's cheeks were pale, and Sophie clutched her bunny like a lifeline. Their small bodies carried too much weariness for children their age. After a long pause, Elena sighed. Fine, just once. That's all. The clinic sat tucked between tall evergreens on the quieter side of town, far away from hospitals, headlines, and gossip. The waiting room was painted in soft watercolor shades of blue and green, with beanbags instead of cold metal chairs. Shelves brimmed with children's books and stuffed animals. Elena sat with Mira on one knee and Sophie on the other. Mira wore pink leggings. Sophie had insisted on a dinosaur hoodie that was far too small, but still her favorite. Marcus sat across from them, his hands folded, his posture calm, not intruding but present. When the nurse stepped in, she smiled warmly. Mira and Sophie, both girls, looked up in surprise. Elena blinked. You knew their names? Of course, the nurse said gently. Mr. Hale provided their records in advance, just the basics. Vaccination history, recent illnesses, illnesses. He wanted to make sure we treated them as individuals, not just as patients. Elena turned sharply toward Marcus. He didn't say anything, didn't gloat, didn't even smile. He just met her gaze steadily. Something inside her shifted. Not because he had arranged the appointment, not because he had paid for it, but because he had told someone else. Treat them like people, like her people. The exam was careful, kind, thorough. Mira hummed softly while the doctor checked her throat. Sophie pointed at a framed photo of a rabbit on the wall and told the nurse that her bunny sometimes got stomach aches too. When it was done, the doctor gave Elena a reassuring smile. They're fine, just run down but strong and deeply bonded. Do you have support at home? Elena's throat tightened. For a moment she wanted to say no, to confess how hard it was to carry everything on her own. Instead, she nodded. I'm figuring it out. Marcus said nothing. He only stood by the door like a sentinel, quiet and steady. On the way home, Elena sat in the back seat with the girls, who quickly drifted off, their heads nestled against her shoulders. The gentle hum of the car rocked them into sleep. She glanced into the rearview mirror. Marcus's eyes were fixed on the road, not on her, not waiting for gratitude. He wasn't asking for thanks. He wasn't expecting anything. He was simply there. And something in Elena's chest, tight for so long, loosened just a little. That evening, after putting the twins to bed, Elena noticed something outside her door. A brown paper bag sat neatly on the mat. No note, no name. Just a quiet bundle waiting to be found. Inside she discovered a small stack of toys, soft building blocks, a memory game, a pop-up animal book. There was a canister of premium formula she could never afford, and a pair of fuzzy slippers still with their tags. One pink, one blue. Elena stood frozen in the doorway for a long time. Then she sank to the floor and cried. It wasn't the money, it wasn't the gifts, it was the thoughtfulness. The slippers weren't identical. They were chosen individually, one for each girl, as if whoever left them knew they were two distinct souls. He hadn't signed his name. He hadn't demanded acknowledgement. He hadn't even knocked. He was simply offering. No conditions, no pressure, just kindness. And for the first time in 2 years, Elena felt something she thought she had lost completely. She didn't feel entirely alone. Rain tapped softly against the windows as Elena dried Mira's curls with the towel. She hummed the same lullaby she had sung every night since the girls were born. Across the living room, Sophie giggled on the couch while Marcus held a picture book upside down, deliberately misreading every word in a booming storyteller's voice. That's not a cow, Sophie shrieked, eyes wide with delight as she pointed at the page. It isn't, Marcus feigned shock, but it's white and has spots. Clearly a Dalmatian. Sophie laughed so hard she toppled backward into the cushions. Mira peeked up, smiling weakly, and even Elena found herself chuckling under her breath. It had been 2 weeks since the first accidental message. 2 weeks of cautious steps, of measured gestures. Marcus never came without reason. Sometimes it was a book he thought Mira would like, Other times, a snack Sophie had once mentioned she loved. Each visit was short, respectful, never overstaying, just enough for the girls to grow familiar with him, and maybe for Elena to slowly soften too. One morning, Elena found him cross-legged on the floor with the twins, struggling to follow an origami tutorial Sophie had begged to try. His large hands fumbled with the fragile paper cranes, but he refused to give up. Mira patted his shoulder gently. "You'll get it, Mr. Marcus." He smiled as if those words meant everything. Another afternoon, he asked if he could take them all to the park. Elena hesitated, ready to decline, but she stopped herself. He had never once pushed beyond her boundaries. Not once. That hour in the park turned into an entire afternoon. They sat on a blanket together, tossing crumbs to ducks while the girls squealed with laughter. When Sophie slipped and landed in a mud puddle, Marcus scooped her up without hesitation, crowning her the Mud Queen of Portland in a dramatic voice. Sophie giggled through tears, and Elena found herself laughing too, an unguarded surprise sound she hadn't heard from her own lips in years. From then on, the rhythm shifted. Grocery runs weren't as exhausting when Marcus came along to carry the bags, or when he distracted the girls by turning the cereal aisle into a scavenger hunt. Some evenings he stayed for dinner. Not always, but often enough that the twins began asking, "Is Mr. Marcus coming today?" And then came the invitation. "I'd like to cook for you," he said one evening, after helping clean up yet another juice spill. "You and the girls. Nothing formal. Just dinner. Just dinner." Elena hesitated, searching his face for any hint of expectation. But all she found was sincerity. "All right," she said quietly. Dinner. Marcus's home wasn't what Elena imagined for a man of his wealth. No sprawling mansion, no cold marble halls. It was warm, tasteful, filled with books and soft lighting. In the corner stood a piano, polished but well-loved. He cooked pasta from scratch, tomatoes and basil picked from pots on his balcony. The twins helped stir the sauce, each wearing an apron several sizes too big. Marcus wore one that read, "Yes, Chef." Afterward, Mira asked if he could play something on the piano. Marcus hesitated, then sat down and let his fingers drift over the keys. The tune was jazzy, warm, and alive. Sophie spun clumsily in circles to the melody while Mira clapped along. Elena stood in the kitchen, rinsing plates. She didn't even notice Marcus approach until his hand reached for the sponge beside hers. Their fingers brushed. She froze. His touch was steady, not hurried, not withdrawn. For the briefest moment, it lingered. Her breath caught in her chest, too loud, too fragile. "I didn't mean to," Marcus began. "It's fine," Elena interrupted too quickly, pulling her hand back and scrubbing the plate harder than necessary. Her heart thudded in her chest, betraying her. For months, years, she had taught herself not to feel, not to hope, not to trust, but something inside her was shifting. Marcus didn't press. He simply dried the dishes in silence, giving her space. Later that night, with the twins fast asleep in their car seats, Elena stood on Marcus's porch before leaving. "They had a good time," she said softly. "I'm glad," Marcus replied. His voice wasn't eager or heavy. It was quiet, simply present. Elena looked at him then. Not at the millionaire, not at the donor, not at the man who bought toys and left them anonymously. She looked at the one who knew how Sophie liked her toes cut diagonally, and how Mira always needed 2 lullabies before bed. "Thank you," she whispered. Marcus didn't say, "You're welcome." He only nodded, watching her carry the girls to the car. But that night, when Elena finally climbed into bed, her hand still tingled where his fingers had brushed hers. And for the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was standing entirely on her own. Long after the twins had drifted into peaceful sleep, Elena sat cross-legged on the living room floor. The soft hum of the baby monitor filled the silence. Her body ached from the day, but her mind refused to settle. Moments from the past weeks replayed in her head. Marcus crouched in the park, listening intently as Sophie explained that ducks were basically dinosaurs. The way his eyes softened when Mira sang her off-key ABCs. His patience, his steadiness. His silence where others would have filled the air with empty words. Almost without realizing it, Elena reached for her sketchbook. It had been months since she'd touched it. The pages still smelled faintly of charcoal. She flipped past half-finished drawings until she found a blank sheet. Then, slowly, carefully, she began to draw. From memory, she captured Marcus sitting on the grass, cross-legged, his head tilted as he listened to Sophie. She drew Mira mid-song clutching a wildflower. She traced the curve of his jaw, the way his hands rested calmly on his knees, the faint crinkle at the corners of his eyes when he laughed. When she finished, her fingers ached, but the picture felt alive. No idealizing, no fantasy, just truth. A man who didn't look at his phone, didn't ask for thanks, didn't run away. A man who simply showed up. She closed the sketchbook quickly, almost ashamed of how much space he was beginning to take up in her thoughts. Days passed quietly. Marcus didn't stop by, but he texted every morning. "Did you sleep at all? Sophie says the duck is her new best friend. Don't forget you're doing better than you think." Elena responded with short replies, but every message stitched something inside her that had been broken for too long. She hadn't realized how lonely her mornings had been until someone remembered to ask. On Friday, Marcus appeared at her door holding a small bag. "I was near the market," he said casually. Sophie mentioned missing that awful green juice. Elena chuckled despite herself. "It tastes like lawn clippings. She loves it anyway." He didn't linger long, just enough to let Mira give him a high five and Sophie cover his arm in butterfly stickers. As he bent to pick up his coat, he noticed something half hidden under the couch. He pulled it out a sketchbook. "Is this yours?" he asked. Before Elena could respond, the book slipped open to the page she had drawn. For a long moment neither spoke. Elena's stomach knotted with embarrassment. She braced herself for awkwardness, for the kind of tension that came when you revealed too much. But Marcus's expression softened. His voice was low when he finally said, "No one's ever seen me like this." Elena swallowed hard. "It's not finished. It's real," he said. "Eyes still on the page. That's what it is." He touched the edge of the drawing carefully, making sure not to smudge it. "I've been in magazines, on stages, behind podiums, but no one has ever captured me just listening. You were easy to draw," Elena admitted quietly. "You were still." He looked at her then, really looked. "Do you know how rare that is, to be seen like that?" Heat rose to her cheeks, but she didn't look away. Marcus closed the sketchbook gently and handed it back. "Thank you. It wasn't a gift," she murmured. "It is now," he said simply. The moment hung between them, delicate, almost fragile, yet unbroken. That night, long after he left, Elena reopened the sketchbook. Her thumb traced the lines of the drawing. His calm posture, Mira's flower, Sophie leaning against him. She thought about what he had said. "No one's ever seen me like this." And that scared her because maybe she was beginning to see him. Elena hadn't planned on overhearing the conversation. She was at the co-op grocery store, pushing the double stroller. Mira hummed some made-up tune while Sophie clutched her plush fox. The day had been good, normal even, until the words cut through like cold wind. "Think it's coincidence," one woman whispered to another near the apples. "She sends a text to a millionaire, and now he's at her house every week." Elena froze. "I heard she used a donor," the other woman added. "Now she's reeling him in, making it look like fate. Classic Cinderella scam. 2 kids, a sad story, and a rich man who doesn't know better." The women laughed softly, their voices dripping with cruelty. Elena's hands clenched around the stroller handle. She could have walked away, she almost did. But then Mira turned to her and whispered, "Mommy, your eyes look mad." That stopped her, because the last thing she wanted was for her daughters to see her defined by someone else's spite. So she didn't say a word. She only looked at the women, calm, steady, deliberate, and pushed the stroller toward checkout. But inside their words burrowed deep. That night, Elena sat on the couch, phone in hand, staring at Marcus's latest text. "Did you make any more dinosaur friends today?" She typed a reply, then deleted it. Typed again, deleted again. She didn't want to sound needy. She didn't want to sound like she was fishing for reassurance. But she was hurting. When Marcus stopped by later with soup and a new children's book about penguins, he caught on immediately. "What happened?" he asked gently. Elena hesitated, then told him. She repeated the women's cruel words, each one stinging again as she spoke. "I know I shouldn't care," she admitted, her voice tight. but part of me does. I've worked so hard to survive, and now it feels like I have to justify every single kindness you give me. Like I'm scheming. Marcus didn't rush to comfort her. He didn't dismiss her feelings. Instead, he reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a card. It was an invitation, celebrating single mothers, an evening of resilience, reflection, and community. Sponsored by the Hale Foundation. "I've been meaning to ask if you'd come," Marcus said. "You don't have to speak, just be there." Elena blinked at the card. "You're sponsoring this?" "I started it last year," Marcus said simply. "It matters to me, and if you're willing, I think your story could mean something to a lot of people." Elena stared at the card. Her instinct was to say no. She hated speaking in public. She hated being seen as a case study. But she thought about the women at the grocery store. She thought about how many others must feel the same shame she carried silently. She lifted her chin. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll do it." The auditorium glowed with soft light strung across the ceiling, casting a warm shimmer over rows of chairs. The air was filled with low murmurs, children's laughter, and the clink of paper cups filled with cheap wine. The space was alive with women of all ages. Mothers with infants tucked in slings, toddlers tugging at their skirts, teenagers standing beside mothers who looked too young themselves. There was exhaustion in their eyes, but also resilience. Elena's palms were slick, her knees locked. She hadn't been on a stage in years. She hadn't told her story to strangers. Not like this. But when she stepped up to the microphone, her eyes found Marcus in the front row. He wasn't watching her with pity or pressure or expectation. He was simply present, calm, his gaze steady, giving her something solid to hold on to. She took a breath. "I never planned to be a single mother," she began. Her voice wavered at first, but then steadied. "But life has a way of tearing up plans and handing you a paintbrush instead." A ripple of quiet laughter moved through the crowd. She told them about her diagnosis, the cold medical words that had forced her hand, about the man she thought she'd spend her life with, who left when children became part of the picture, about making the choice to become a mother, not because she gave up on love, but because she wanted to embrace the kind of love that never left. "I was 4 months pregnant," Elena continued, her voice stronger now, "when my family lost everything. Money, reputation, security. It all disappeared overnight. I went from managing high-profile campaigns to counting quarters at the pharmacy, from catered lunches to scraping together groceries." She paused, scanning the faces in the audience. Some were crying already, some nodded in recognition. "And yet," she said softly, "I've never regretted becoming a mother, not once. Because even when I thought I had lost everything, being a mom gave me more than I could ever measure." The room was silent, the kind of silence that hums with weight. Elena drew in one more breath. "Being a mother didn't break me, it rebuilt me." For a moment, no one moved. Then Marcus rose from his chair, his hands coming together in a firm, clear clap. The sound echoed through the room, steady and proud. One by one, others joined him. The applause grew, rising like a tide until the entire auditorium was on his feet. Elena's eyes found Marcus again through the blur of tears. He didn't mouth words. He didn't need to. Everything she needed was there in his look, recognition, respect, and something deeper. Not just for the mother she had become, but for the woman she had always been. 6 months later, the house wasn't perfect. The backyard was overgrown, and the porch swing Marcus had promised to fix still creaked with every breeze. But it was theirs. A small craftsman cottage with faded shutters and wild roses crawling up the fence. Sophie spent her afternoons curled under the rosebush, whispering to the neighbor's tabby cat, insisting she was learning to speak cat. Mira sat at the picnic table, covered in finger paint, explaining that rainbows wore shoes because they needed to walk to the sky. Inside, Marcus worked from home 3 days a week, sleeves rolled up as he discussed pediatric research on video calls. He never missed dinner. Not once. 4 figures in a garden. Mira chasing a butterfly, Sophie petting the cat, Marcus stretched out on a blanket with a book, and Elena herself barefoot in the grass, her head tipped back in laughter. No headlines, no shadows, just joy. That evening, they dined under strings of golden lights Marcus had hung across the fence. Dinner was simple, Plastic plates, too many napkins, a bottle of warm cider. Mira told a winding story about how worms were secret superheroes. Sophie meowed her agreement, face smeared with sauce. Elena leaned against Marcus's shoulder, sipping her drink, her eyes on the girls. "Do you remember," she asked softly, "that night I sent you that text by accident?" "Hard to forget," he said with a smile. "I was terrified," Elena admitted, "not just because the girls were sick, but because I thought I had ruined our lives. I thought I'd given up any chance of love you saved them," Marcus said simply. She shook her head. "I thought choosing motherhood meant I was closing the door forever, that I couldn't have both." Marcus turned to her, his gaze steady. "And now," she exhaled slowly, "now I know I wasn't giving up on love. I was choosing the first kind of love I'd ever known. The strongest one, the love between a mother and her children. And somehow that love gave me everything, even you." Marcus reached out, threading his fingers gently through hers. "You know what I think?" She tilted her head. "What? Love isn't about choosing one thing over another. Love is the thing that chooses us when we're finally ready for it." Elena blinked back tears, her lips curling. "That's cheesy," he grinned, "but true." She rested her head against him, listening to the twins argue over the last piece of garlic bread. And for the first time in years, Elena felt safe. The night deepened, and the garden filled with the laughter of two small girls. Mira stomped across the grass, pretending to be a superhero worm, while Sophie followed, meowing loudly, convinced she was part cat, part sidekick. The string lights swayed gently overhead, painting the yard in golden warmth. Elena sat back against Marcus, her body finally at ease. For years she had carried everything alone: fear, responsibility, heartbreak. But here, in this imperfect little house with its cracked porch and wild garden, she felt something she never thought she'd feel again: home. She turned to look at Marcus. His sleeve was rolled up, sauce smeared on the cuff from helping Sophie wipe her chin. His hair was a little messy from chasing Mira earlier. He looked nothing like the polished tech millionaire splashed across business magazines. He looked real, she whispered. "I love you." She had sworn to protect them with everything she had, even if it meant living her life in solitude. But now she knew she didn't have to. Marcus padded quietly up behind her, resting his hand on her shoulder. Together they stood there in silence, watching over the girls. The soft glow of the nightlight cast a halo across the room. "Do you ever think about it?" she whispered. "About what?" "That if I hadn't sent that message, none of this would have happened." Marcus smiled softly. "I don't think about what might not have happened. I think about what did." Elena's chest swelled with gratitude, with love so fierce it frightened her. She leaned into him, letting the weight she carried for years finally rest in someone else's arms. Their story wasn't glamorous. It wasn't the fairy tale others might imagine. The house was small, the yard overrun with weeds, the bills still a constant balancing act. But there was laughter now. There was warmth. There was partnership. Family, Elena realized, didn't have to be perfect. It just had to be real. And sometimes, real begins with the most unexpected message sent to the wrong person at the exact right time.